Welcome to Crosspointe.
Welcome to Crosspointe.
Welcome to Crosspointe.
We are an inclusive faith community
seeking to live out the loving, just, and generous way of Jesus.
We are participants in a long tradition
that's less concerned with doctrines and dogma that demand total agreement,
but a life to be lived, enjoyed, and given away to others.
What unites us is a growing awareness that life is precious.
That we are made by love in order to love.
This community is comprised of and affirms the entire human family.
Regardless of race, age, creed,
physical abilities, marital or economic status,
gender identity, or sexual orientation.
So, if you're curious and have come to see,
if you are tired and have come to rest,
if you are grateful and have come to share,
if you are wounded and have come to heal,
if you're joyful and have come to celebrate,
if you are uprooted and have come to belong,
welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Got so down in trouble, I nearly lost my head. I started waking every morning, filled with sadness, fear, and dread. The world I took for granted was crashing to the ground, and I realized I might not live long enough to ever see it turn around. But then I got to thinking of the ones who came before, of all the sacrifices that they made to open up so many doors. Doors I got to walk through, on streets paved for me, by people who were working on a world they never got to see. Now we're working on a world I may never see. I'm joining forces with the warriors of love who came before, and will follow you and me. I get up in the morning knowing I'm privileged just to be working on a world I may never see. Don't have all the answers to the troubles of the day. Neither did all our ancestors. They persevered anyway. When I see a little baby reaching out its arms to me, I remember why I'm working on a world I may never see. Now we're working on a world I may never see. I'm joining forces with the warriors of love who came before, and will follow you and me. I get up in the morning knowing I'm privileged just to be working on a world that I may never see. We're working on a world that I may never see. lay your troubles down. In your dark moments, when your heart's weak, bring yourself broken, you will find me. Who wrote the rain? Who wrote the sun in? Who called your name? Where are you running? I'm gonna be there near or far. I'm gonna meet you where you are. Who wrote the rain? Who wrote the sun in? When you come thirsty, when the well's dry, when your soul's dirty, I am by your side. When your faith's broken, when you can't see, with my arms open, you will find me. Who wrote the rain? Who wrote the sun in? Who called your name? Where are you running? I'm gonna be there near or far. I'm gonna meet you where you are. Who wrote the rain? Who wrote the sun in? You carried all my shame. When you call my name, I am not the same. Who wrote the rain? Who wrote the sun in? Who calls your name? Where are you running? I'm gonna be there near or far. I'm gonna meet you where you are. Who wrote the rain? Who wrote the sun in? Who wrote the rain? Who wrote the sun in?
Good morning, Crosspointe. I've got a couple of quick announcements for us this week. A few times each year, we give our volunteers and staff a chance to take a break and recharge in an intentional practice of rest. On next Sunday, July 5th, we invite you to do the same. We will not be holding in-person services, but our online service will still premiere at 10 a.m. on our YouTube channel. If you want to partner with Crosspointe financially on all the many awesome things that are going on in our community, there are lots of ways that you can do that. You can find out more at crosspointe.org/contribute or text crosspointenc to 77977. We love that we have people watching right now that are joining us from all over the state, the country, and the world. But this next announcement is primarily for those of you that are watching locally. This month, we have been highlighting volunteers and how they serve in our community. Sunday mornings do not happen without volunteers. Whether it's children's ministry, student ministry, guest services, production, or opportunities outside of Sunday mornings, such as care teams or outreach teams, within this large variety of volunteer roles, there are also different commitments from every week to once a month to every once in a while and everything in between. And as much as we need volunteers to commit to these roles, we also present it as an opportunity to you. Because the truth is that you will get as much, if not more, out of serving as the people you are serving. You will connect with other volunteers and form deeper relationships with people that you see on Sunday mornings. You will tap into your own giftedness and stretch some of those perhaps underused emotional and intellectual muscles. You will gain a deeper sense of community with Crosspointe and all the things that are going on here. So there is a QR code that you're going to see on the screen. You can use that to connect directly to a form that indicates your interest in volunteering. It's not a commitment, just an interest form. You can also go to crosspoint.org/volunteer for more information and find that same interest form there. Thanks so much for considering this. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week.
Good morning. So one fun fact about me is that my middle name is Ruth. It was a long family tradition on my mom's side of the family to give the first daughter that middle name. And that was me. It's my mom's middle name. It's several of my aunt's middle names. I don't know how far back it goes because I haven't really checked, but because of my middle name, I've always had a soft spot for the story of Ruth. Now, Ruth, it's a short book. It's only 4 chapters. It's found in the Hebrew Bible, what the Christians refer to as the Old Testament. We're not going to dive very deep into it today, but it is worth reading if you get a chance. It's a love story. It's a scandalous romance, really, of an immigrant woman and an Israelite man who fall for one another. And the woman's name is, you guessed it, Ruth. Short story longer, this foreign-born woman ends up being the great-grandmother of King David, which makes her the direct ancestor of Jesus in the biblical genealogies. There's a very beautiful passage towards the beginning of the book. It's so beautiful, in fact, that it's often read at weddings. And this is what it says in Ruth chapter 1. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. There, where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. It truly is beautiful, and it does read well for a wedding. But this actually isn't a conversation between Ruth and her future love. Ruth actually said this to her mother-in-law, Naomi, at one of the most horrible and most difficult times of their lives. Naomi had immigrated with her husband and sons to Moab several years before. The sons had married local women there, one of whom was Ruth. First, Naomi's husband passed away, and then both of her sons died, one of whom was Ruth's husband. Ruth and Naomi's losses were immense. It left them vulnerable and isolated and in extreme poverty. Naomi wanted to go home to her country. So, hoping that they would return home to their families and make a new start, Naomi told both of her daughters-in-laws to stay behind. But Ruth insisted on immigrating to Naomi's home country to stay with her. Now, Naomi understood how hard it was to live in a place so different from your own. She understood the burden of being an outsider, of not fully grasping the language or the culture, of not having the benefits of citizenship, of always having to work 3 times as hard just to be 2 steps behind. Naomi wasn't, however, overly concerned with how her own country would treat Ruth when she immigrated. Israel had laws and mandates in place from their God that protected the stranger. I mean, after all, the Israelites had their own story after story of forced migration and immigration. Adam and Eve had been forced to leave the Garden of Eden and make a life somewhere new. Their son, Cain, had been forced to leave and seek asylum elsewhere. Joseph had been sold into slavery in Israel, and then when he was finally freed, he lived out the remainder of his life in Egypt, far from his home country. The Israelites, as a group, they'd lived in Egypt for over 400 years before being freed from enslavement and migrating into the wilderness, which was a land claimed by multiple foreign nations. Israel, as a group and as individuals, spent much of their history as strangers in a strange land. In other words, they were immigrants, migrants, refugees, asylum seekers. Later on in the Hebrew text, we hear other stories of heroes like Esther and Mordecai who were living outside their own country of origin when they saved the people of Israel. And even later, we're told David fled for his life from King Saul and lived among the Philistines until it was safe for him to return home. Israel understood well the plight of the stranger. And Naomi knew that while there were still dangers for a widowed young woman, there were laws in place to protect her daughter-in-law, the immigrant. Laws that required the farmers to be less than 100% productive so that the immigrants and the impoverished could gather food. Laws that required protection and hospitality for the stranger and the sojourner. Work laws that forbade exploitation or abuse of the alien. Laws that actually required hospitality. And in fact, to not follow these laws of protection and welcome was considered a sin. It had some serious consequences. Israelite law reminded its people, here's just one, in Deuteronomy, that God defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow and loves the foreigner residing among you. Give them food and clothing, and you are to love those who are foreigners, for you yourself were a foreigner in Egypt. In other words, don't forget, you're descendants of immigrants. Or other things like in Deuteronomy 24, do not take advantage of a hired worker who is poor and needy, whether that worker was a fellow Israelite or a foreigner residing in one of your towns. Pay them their wage each day before sunset because they are poor and are counting on it. Otherwise, they may cry to the Lord against you, and you will be guilty of sin. All people were to be offered the same opportunity to make a day's wage, regardless of citizenship or nation of origin. Israel's own origin story compelled it to practice compassion that was blind to human distinctions. We see this in Genesis chapter 1, the very beginning of their story, when God said, "Let us make humans in our image according to our likeness." So God created humans in their own image, in the image of God. God created them, male and female. God created them. There's nothing in this origin story that suggests that certain qualifications or documents are required to bear the image of God. All people, regardless of race, age, creed, physical abilities, marital or economic status, gender identity, sexual orientation, immigration status, or country of origin, have been breathed upon with the same breath of life and carry the same divine image. In theology, there's a Latin term used to describe this. It's called imago Dei, which is literally translated image of God. It asserts that humanity is uniquely created to reflect the divine character and love of God. It also asserts the inerrant dignity, equality, and purpose of every human being, who are therefore equally worthy of compassion. And lest we fall prey to believing that these were just somehow the impetus of an Old Testament God or outdated ideas that no longer apply to our modern context, let us not forget that God's own Son, the one and only very famous Jesus Christ, born centuries later, and whom our very religion is based upon, was one of the most radically welcoming and hospitable people that we remember today. Jesus' own family tree was full of foreigners, Ruth, of course, who we mentioned, but also Tamar and Rahab, even Bathsheba, all considered non-Israelite foreigners who are welcomed into the family. So both Jesus' earthly and heavenly heritage compelled him to practice hospitality. And he taught his followers to do the same. Jesus was Jewish, and he knew the laws of the Torah, including those that had applied to the treatment of Ruth so many centuries ago. But when he was asked which laws were the most important to follow, he summarized all of the law by saying, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself." On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets. So the whole book, all of them. Love God, love yourself, love your neighbor, even if we don't know how, even if we don't like ourselves, and even if our neighbor isn't from around here. Jesus taught that the most favor would come to those who acknowledged the image of God in all humanity and acted accordingly. So in Matthew chapter 25, Jesus explained this type of loving hospitality to his disciples in this way. He clarified it for them. He said, "I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me." The disciples, of course, they couldn't remember a time that they had actually done any of those things for Jesus, and they told him so. So he simplified things once again and explained, "Truly, I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it to me." In other words, feeding the poor, clothing the needy, caring for the sick, humanizing the imprisoned, welcoming the stranger is how we invite and celebrate the Spirit of Christ among us. It's how we show love. It's how we practice hospitality. It's how we reflect the image of God inside of us. And again, Jesus didn't give qualifications for who was supposed to receive this radical hospitality. He just gave the mandate to put it into practice. Jesus was a teacher and practitioner of radical hospitality. Radical, as an adjective, means to affect the fundamental nature of something. And radical hospitality calls us to go beyond comfort zones and cultural norms, which was Jesus's MO. He welcomed and placed himself in proximity to all the people he wasn't supposed to: women, children, formerly incarcerated, the sick, the unimportant, government workers, military guys, women with reputations, people from cultures and countries that were not his own. And as for the word hospitality, this was an integral part of the culture. Early Christians were held to this high hospitality standard as well. Paul encouraged his churches to practice hospitality, as did the writer of the letter of Hebrews. Now, in the letter to Titus and Timothy, we have a list of things that make a good leader. There are things like sobriety, being married to one woman, meaning being married to one woman at a time, being self-controlled, and this is the same word that Paul in the letter of the Hebrews uses. They were to be hospitable. But this English word doesn't quite get to the heart of the meaning of the Greek word here, which was philoxenos, or philoxenos. It is really two words combined: philo, or filio, and xenos. Philo, meaning loving friendships, as in Philadelphia, Philadelphia, which is the city of brotherly love, and xenos, meaning stranger or outsider. So philoxenos is better translated as stranger love, or friend of stranger or outsiders. In the first Christian churches, one of the main qualifications for leadership was that you had to be welcoming to and loving of outsiders. In the ancient Mediterranean world, hospitality was more than just casual entertaining or a Martha Stewart-esque dinner party. It was a sacred and vital communal duty. For the Jews, this dated back centuries to the laws of Israel, laws that made them unique in how their society functioned. These were the very laws that, because they were broken so egregiously, caused the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to be destroyed, which is a sermon we've had before and aren't getting into today. These were also the laws that kept Ruth, a widowed immigrant woman, safe and cared for when she left her home country and entered into a new country to care for her mother-in-law. If we get down to it, if you're non-Jewish or Gentile, as is the term used in the New Testament, then we are strangers, foreigners to Jesus' very religion. Jesus was not a Christian because Christianity didn't exist during his lifetime, or even for decades and decades after his death. Jesus was Jewish. It was Paul, who was also Jewish, who made certain that the Gentiles understood in his churches that their foreignness did not exclude them from the love and inclusion of God. Paul also wanted all Jesus' followers to understand it, that when it came right down to it, their true citizenship wasn't an earthly one anyway. They were citizens of God's kingdom, which includes every people, tribe, tongue, and nation. Now, it is no secret, that immigration is an ongoing and hot topic in our country right now. And there have been some very disturbing developments in North Carolina this past week. On June 24th, the North Carolina General Assembly overrode the governor's veto of Senate Bill 153. No one is denying this was done in a very suspect way. But more importantly, the results of this legislation have several serious consequences, and here are just a few. This bill requires 4 law enforcement agencies, including Highway Patrol, to enter into agreements with ICE, which require their agents to become trained to function as ICE agents. Meaning that if Highway Patrol pulls someone over, they could be required to check their immigration status, require documentation, detain them if they cannot provide it. So in addition to promoting racial profiling, this bill adds more work to our already overworked Highway Patrol officers. It endangers the lives of our neighbors. This bill also removes governmental immunity for local governments that violate the state's anti-sanctuary law, in essence, taking power away from local municipalities, and it requires that local municipalities not assist anyone who is undocumented. This bill also requires state agencies to take additional steps, because there are already some in place, to ensure that undocumented people are not accessing public benefits. So this includes medical care, food, housing assistance, mental health care, unemployment, child care subsidies, any aid at all that has any sort of government connection, which means that any nonprofit organizations who receive any form of government funding, grants, or whatever, including some of our own precious partners who help the most vulnerable in our community, will no longer be able to assist anyone found to be undocumented. There are other things included in this bill, but we're short on time. So to be clear, this law will impact immigrant families. It will also impact our law enforcement officers who seek to create safe and welcoming communities. And when something affects one of us, it affects all of us. It will affect us all. This bill will erode community trust. It pits neighbor against each other. It forces nonprofits and individuals to potentially break the law if they follow through with their missions to help all people, including the stranger. I dare say it violates the very teachings of Christ. Because let us not forget that Jesus himself was a brown-skinned, poor, refugee, stepchild of a blue-collar worker whose mom and stepdad fled their home with him when his life had been threatened by the government officials, which is not dissimilar to so many stories we hear coming from our own borders today. Mary, Joseph, and Jesus lived as refugees, asylum seekers, as immigrants in Egypt. I dare say they would not be offered a visa to enter the United States today. There are things we can do about this bill. As people of faith who are part of a larger ecumenical faith community, not just Christians, but of Muslims, Jews, Buddhists, and so many others, all of whom have in some form a call within our religions to welcome the stranger and love the other, we've been very specifically asked to pray, which is no small thing. This is one of the most anti-immigrant pieces of legislation ever passed in our state. We can offer prayers for our entire immigrant community. We can also offer prayers for our Highway Patrol officers who already have more responsibilities than they can handle and are now being told to implement a law that makes even more work for them and could go against their personal conscience. We can pray for our leaders as they decide how to implement these laws. We can also raise awareness of this law and its heavy negative implications. Our voices can impact how this law is implemented. And as Jesus followers, we are in a unique position to let our leaders know through calls, letters, emails, etc., that laws like these do not represent the Jesus that we follow. And over the next few months, there'll be tangible ways to join in with others across our state. And just to name one, on August 8th, there will be an Interfaith Day of Prayer and Action in Raleigh, and there's a QR code you can scan for more information and to register. As more opportunities come up, we'll be sure to have them available on our website. But I encourage you personally to dig deeper into our new North Carolina law, this and others, and decide what action, if any, you feel led to take. Now, I understand that the issue of immigration has been and continues to be difficult. This has been the case throughout history and around the world, but it is especially disturbing, particularly in our time and in our country and in our state right now. There are many arguments to be made, and the issues are complex. There are competing values and principles. We do not agree on how it should be handled. There is debate over policies and their consequences. However, none of these things absolve us of our Christian responsibility. And I don't use that term lightly, so let me rephrase. None of these absolve us of our Jesus-following responsibility toward the stranger the foreigner, our neighbor. There are a few things that, regardless of our political parties or political inclinations, and given all that we've talked about today, that I believe we can agree on. First, all humans were created in the image of God and are bearers of God's image and are therefore inherently valuable. And because of this, there is no other. There is no they. There is only we. And one thing that helps me remember this little thing was that I was taught in kindergarten, but I so often forget: putting myself in someone else's shoes. Sometimes simply asking questions shifts our perspective. Things like, what would lead a person to immigrate in the first place? Why not just go about things legal way or the right way? And there are so many answers to these questions, but here are just a few. For many people trying to enter the United States, there simply is no legal way to come. The pathways are complex, they are long, they're often untenable, which leaves them with impossible choices. Some move because of an inability to find work in their home countries, sometimes in part due to US policies. They want to escape grinding poverty. They want to escape unrelenting violence, to be able to adequately protect and feed their children, to give them a more hopeful future. Some want to reunite with family already in the United States. Some risk death if they stay in their own country. Some want a better opportunity to support themselves. And we have to remember that most often, immigrants face incredibly difficult choices with very few options. Because of more militarization at the borders, particularly the US and Mexican border, immigrants without documents have to use more and more difficult and life-threatening routes, and more are dying en route. This is not a choice that any of us would make, given better options. Second, I want to show you something. So this is a picture of Earth that was taken from space by the Artemis II mission back in April. So what do you see? Ocean and land and sky and deep blues and greens. It is truly beautiful. And what's missing from this picture are borders, because those are man-made. From the perspective of a Jesus follower, the person's race, age, creed, physical abilities, marital or economic status, gender identity, sexual orientation, immigration status, or country of origin do not matter to God. Outside distinctions, national distinctions, have nothing to do with the kingdom of God. And therefore, they should have no impact on how we treat, think about, or talk about one another. And one thing we can do to help with this is learning to be mindful of our language and adjusting how we refer to people. So for example, using the term undocumented instead of illegal. The term illegal or illegal immigrant automatically criminalizes the person instead of the action they are purported to have committed. It stereotypes undocumented people as having committed a crime. But in actuality, under current US immigration law, being undocumented is not a crime. It's a civil violation. In fact, about 42% of undocumented immigrants enter the United States legally, but overstayed their visas. And what that is a civil violation, not a federal, state, or local crime. So similarly, when we use the term alien or illegal alien, it automatically implies someone who has entered without permission and has nefarious intent or questionable motivation, which, as we've mentioned before, is almost all of the time not the case. So another thing that we might agree on is the value of educating ourselves. Misinformation and misconceptions about immigration permeate our lives, and often these are just used as excuses for existing prejudices. They make them sound just and noble. And a few places we can start with education is checking sources. We can consider the motivations, the employment, the financing of the author that put the facts out. We can fact check statistics from reputable sources. So for one example, for a while now, the rationale for detaining so many immigrants is that they're criminals, that they're dangerous, that they target the vulnerable and make our towns unsafe. But in fact, a study by the United States government that was compiled over 150 years of data found that immigrants are significantly less likely to commit crimes than US-born citizens, and that immigrants have never been incarcerated at a greater rate than those born in the US. Outside of current detention rates, if you consider that incarceration, immigrants today are 60% less likely to be incarcerated than the US born. But these truths, they don't support justification for abuse, and so they are rarely, if ever, reported. As people of faith who value truth, we must be open to changing our own views if they are incorrect. Taking the time to root out truth when we are handed false and hurtful information is another tangible way that we can love. And the next things we can hopefully agree on is that we've been called to love everyone. Our God, ourselves, our friends, our neighbor, our enemies, the stranger. This love in practice looks like radical hospitality. Radical hospitality asks us to confront our biases, our fears, our prejudices. It demands that we see others as Jesus sees them, which is as God made them. God's image bearers, deserving of dignity and respect. And this hospitality is radical because it challenges societal barriers, it breaks down walls of race, class, nationality, religion, and it creates communities rooted in love and equality rather than in fear. So, a quick recap of the things that we can hopefully all agree on. Remember that all people are created in the image of God. Remember that human distinctions don't matter to God. Educating and seeking out the truth is a way to love, and we are called to love all people with radical hospitality. We are a people who follow the teachings of Jesus, who welcomed the unwelcome, who sat with the outcast, who walked alongside the stranger. And we believe all humans bear the image of God and are innately worthy of care, of compassion, of love and respect. And may we act accordingly. Let me close this with a prayer and a blessing. Loving God, help us to banish fear and embrace each of your children as our own. Give us the grace to recognize you in the face of the stranger. Give us the courage to stand with the displaced, to raise our voices against injustices wherever they may be. May our tables be wide enough to share bread with the stranger. May the walls between us crumble into bridges of understanding. And may we see in the face of every stranger the spark of our shared humanity. Amen.
If you would like to know more or get connected to Crosspointe, go to crosspoint.org. If you're in need of care or assistance, go to crosspoint.org/care. And welcome home.